Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. So today, what we are going to be looking at is Captain America: Civil War on our latest entry of Journey to Endgame. So this was the second directorial outing for the Russo brothers. Um, and obviously the next one would be Infinity War and Endgame, and this was kind of their stepping up point. It was a bit different than Captain America because they were dealing with a lot of other characters. I like to refer to this movie as Avengers 2.5 because that's really what it is. It involves all of the Avengers. The Avengers are a core part of it, even though it is at its heart a Captain America story. So we have a lot of characters in this. We have a bunch of characters that are getting just introduced, including Black Panther, who's played by Chadwick Boseman, and Spider-Man, played by Tom Holland. And then we also have returning characters from Age of Ultron, which we haven't really touched up with in a while, like Vision and Scarlet Witch, um, and Hawkeye, and a few others. So here's the thing with this movie, and I rewatched it recently, just so I could kind of get a feel for it again, because I really do enjoy this film, but it has problems, especially at the beginning, that are kind of explained in the details. It's one of those. And I'll get to it as we go through the plot of the film, but it's one of those things that the Russos did their best to find motivation for Captain America and Iron Man to form teams and to fight, and I get that. I get that the plot is literally designed to separate them and make them fight. It's essentially it's kind of like Batman v Superman in that sense, where the plot is to build up to the conflict, as opposed to the conflict to be sprinkled throughout the plot. Now, I will say this movie is extremely action packed. There are just a crap ton of action scenes in this film. In fact, I would go as far to say that a majority of the film is action, especially going into the final act. But let's get past that. Let's go into the film. So, the early part of the film, we see a flashback to 1991 in an event where the Winter Soldier has been thawed out and he's been sent out to kill somebody. We don't know who it is at that point, and he causes a car crash. And this comes up a couple more times over the film before we get clarification for it at the very end. Now, after that, we go into the Avengers performing an operation where they're trying to hunt down Brock Rumlow, who we saw at the end of Captain America the Winter Soldier was involved in the building collapse at S.H.I.E.L.D., but was apparently revived. And he has now fully become the villain Crossbones. Um, he's in the whole suit and everything like that. But basically, he's breaking into an infectious disease center to steal an infectious disease and release it. Um, Now, together with the now, the new Avengers that we see at the end of Captain America, at the end of Avengers 2 or Avengers Age of Ultron, um, he stops them, but Rumlow tries to kill himself and Captain America by activating a bomb vest, but Scarlet Witch is able to contain the blast and throws him up into the air where he explodes and takes out part of a building nearby that apparently had some Wakandan relief workers in it. Now, here's my first problem with this movie, and again, it's mostly the stuff in the first act. It's mostly the setup stuff that I have problems with. The actual fighting and stuff like that, the motivations, I get, but the setup is fundamentally flawed, and this is the start of it. Is this idea that this is the last straw essentially for the Avengers, because after this. We have an appearance by William Hurt as Thunderbolt Ross, who again we haven't seen since the Incredible Hulk in 2008, which that was a weird choice to me. But and all the scenes with him, by the way, are fundamentally flawed. He is a terribly written character in this movie. I'm sorry to say. But the scene with Brock Rumlow blowing himself up and getting launched up into the sky. Now, in that scene, if he had detonated that bomb and Scarlet Witch had done nothing, they were literally in a crowd of people. bunches and bunches of people would have died. They show the explosion. The explosion takes out an entire floor of a building. It's not something that it's not like it's going to, just kind of fizzle out and it'll just take out Captain America and maybe a couple of fruit stands or something. No, this thing took out a floor of a building, so it would have killed dozens and dozens and dozens of people around it. Probably maybe even 30 or 40, and injured hundreds. This, and she launches up into the sky. It takes out one floor of a building and a few. They don't even state exactly how many casualties it actually causes in the building, but I can guarantee you it's probably more than what was on the street. Um, because again, you have people immediately around the area. Now, if it had been a situation where it was simply Captain America and Crossbones fighting, and there was everybody else kind of just ran, and nobody was around them, then that probably would have been more understandable. But it wasn't. They had an entire crowd around them. So her choice ultimately caused fewer casualties than if she had done nothing. And everybody say, "Oh, she's a monster." Oh, all this. It's like, what? What are you talking about? Like they're watching like news reports about like, oh, how Wanda Maximoff is a monster because she destroyed she destroyed this building with some release workers from Wakanda in it. When in reality, when she saved a bunch of people that would have been killed on the street. So it again that is that's bad writing, and that is a bad plot point. But then we go into this kind of weird thing with Tony Stark, and this is another thing that I don't really I understand why it's there, but at the same time it goes to put things on Tony, which I understand, and it's supposed to put him in his corner essentially. Is he meets this woman? He's having this presentation at MIT, and he says he's going to fund all of these kids that are um, all these kids that have projects and stuff like that. They're all going to get funded, and he's going to fund them. So okay, that's fine. And then he goes into this back room where there's an elevator, and he's waiting for it. And there's this woman who basically says that he killed her son because her son was off in Sokovia doing some kind of like humanitarian work, and he died during the Sokovian incident. And again, I'll get back to this in a minute, but it's like, okay, like look, we get it. It was Tony Stark's fault that Ultron even exists. But how the hell does she know that? Like, we understand that Tony Stark knows that he built a murder bot. We understand that he has issues with that. At the same time, you're trying to convey the fact that this woman says that he killed her son, when if he and the other Avengers had done nothing, the entire world would have been wiped out. So it wouldn't have just been her son, it would have been everybody's son and everybody's daughter and sister and brother and husband and wife and everything else. um, so it's kind of foolish to go up and say, "Oh, you killed my son," when in reality, the only reason why you are even still alive is because of him. Um, and again, it means more to Tony from a personal standpoint, but that doesn't carry over that much into the following scenes. Now, the next scene I'm going to go over is not too long after this, where Tony and all of the Avengers that are around, except minus Thor, who's off in space, and the Hulk, who has now gone to War World, and he will not show up again until Thor Ragnarok. So he goes there along with Thunderbolt Ross, who is now the Secretary of State, by the way. I don't know whoever made that decision is a goddamn idiot. If you had kept him as a military general, I could understand that to a point. I could understand that, but you made him Secretary of State almost when he literally almost caused a national disaster by helping to create Abomination in the Incredible Hulk. So why you would do that, I have no idea. But the next few scenes do a terrible job of setting up the Avengers for what is known as the Sokovia Accords. Now, these documents were basically drawn up after the events of Avengers Age of Ultron, that essentially limits the Avengers' ability to operate in foreign countries or to operate worldwide. Basically, they can only intervene in a situation if the UN approves of it, and they can't act until that happens, which is ridiculous and stupid. And they claim that it was 100 and something companies that they claim or countries claim that they agreed to these accords. They voted on it already and they agreed to them, but they haven't been put into accordance yet because the Avengers have to formally sign that they agree with the accords themselves. Now they bring up four events um, as the reasons behind why the accords took place. Now, the first one is the Battle of New York, which makes no sense because the Battle of New York is literally the cause of the U.S. government caused the Battle of New York because they were screwing around with the Tesseract, because they were messing around with it, and Loki came to Earth and opened a portal so the Chitauri army could come through. And again, if the Avengers were not there, the Chitauri would have flooded through the portal and taken New York City and probably taken the world not long after that. It wouldn't have been that surprising. So the Avengers save the world, and they're pointing it out as a bad thing. It's kind of like the idea of, all right, it's the idea of you have these two. You have somebody who's locked in a car. You have somebody who's locked in a car who can't get out for whatever reason. Maybe they were in an accident or something like that, or they're locked in the maybe they're locked in the trunk. That's a better example. Maybe they're locked in the trunk of a car, and they can't get out. They can't breathe. There's a problem. Something happened that they need to get out of that trunk for whatever reason, or else they will die. And somebody then proceeds to cut open the trunk with a circular saw and remove the person. Now, that is saving somebody's life, but it would be the same. Now we have a situation where if somebody who is the anagram of Thunderbolt Ross comes up and says, "Oh, you just cut a hole in my car. What the hell? Who cares about this chick? You cut a hole in my car." The lives matter more than the collateral in all of the situations that they list. Now, again, the Battle of New York is the first one. Then they list Captain America: The Winter Soldier, where the helicarrier is going down to Washington D.C., which again was the product of the government and the product of Hydra. And if Captain America and the others hadn't shut down the helicarriers, they would have killed millions of people. Now, the other thing is Ross should know about that. He is the Secretary of State. He should have been briefed on that situation fully. So he's obviously using this as an excuse, and the other Avengers also should know that, because I'm sure Cap explained it to them, the ones that were not involved. Um, so we move past that, and then they go to Sokovia. Now, Sokovia, if you're going to put it on anybody, you should be putting it on Tony Stark. He should be the one that is going on trial for that, because he's the one that created Ultron. Captain America and the rest of the Avengers did not do anything in regards to that, and in fact, they opposed it. And Tony Stark essentially did it on his own. The rest of the Avengers were basically playing cleanup crew on that. So none of those are good examples. And then of course they have the incident where Wanda puts the exploding guy up in the air and blows up part of the building. So the entire thing is a farce from point one. But the thing is, in the scene where they're showing this, none of the Avengers say anything. Captain America doesn't say anything. Iron Man doesn't say anything. None of the other Vision. Everybody's there. Nobody says anything. Um, and it feels really weird because they all know the backstories just as well as the audiences do. So there was reasoning behind. The only thing that you can pin on an Avenger is Sokovia, and you can pin it on Iron Man, and you can't pin it on anyone else. There's no evidence to pin it on anyone else. And even later on in the movie, they claim that there's no like due process or anything like that. There's a lot of very strange things that this movie does to facilitate the conflict. Um, and like I said, that scene starts it, and then of course that starts the break off where Captain America and Falcon and a few others, they kind of step away and they say no, we're not going to sign this, as opposed to Tony Stark and War Machine and all them, they all sign. So you have this whole situation now. So you've set your sides essentially at this point. You have set your sides. Black Widow kind of fluctuates, but you've essentially set your sides. And Captain America decides to go after Bucky because the Actually, sorry. Before I get to that, we have the Peggy Carter funeral. So Peggy Carter passes away, and Captain America is at her funeral. It's the scene we see in the in one of the Endgame trailers. I think it was the second one. And Sharon Carter, who we find out is actually the Sharon from Captain America: The Winter Soldier, comes up and gives a speech about her aunt, who Peggy Carter was apparently her aunt, and Captain America essentially it feels a bit clunky. It feels a kind of like validation for Captain America because she goes up and she essentially gives a speech that almost validates his exact point of view and reinforces it. So it feels a tad clunky, but it does work. Then we move past that and we go into the Vienna peace talks, which is what sets up Black Panther's arc, and this is also where we first meet him. So Steve Rogers is not in Vienna initially during the he's in London at the funeral, and him and Sam Wilson are both at the funeral, and Sharon Carter, but at the Vienna peace conferences, a bomb explodes that they blame on the Winter Soldier based on facial recognition because they pick him up on a camera. So now Cap has to go after Bucky again and try and find him. Again, they never really explain how he finds him technically. Um, he's essentially a ghost. Actually, sorry, if I remember, now I'm remembering, Sharon Carter gives Cap a file about it. So now you have kind of the plot set in motion for Captain America personally is they're going after Bucky. He does not believe that Bucky actually committed the crime, and he is correct. And we meet during all this, we meet our villain, which again there is a Marvel villain problem here, with Helmut Zemo, who is very different in the comic books from what he is here. Here he is basically a Sokovian. It really doesn't even facilitate the plot all that much. He's a Sokovian special operations person or an intelligence person. He's essentially like a Sokovian CIA. And his whole goal, his family was killed during the Sokovia incident, and he is now out for revenge against the Avengers, and he decides to split them up and pit them against each other, essentially, and facilitate that. Um, Now, here's the major problem is I feel like there's way too much reinforcement in terms of the Avengers turning on each other. You didn't need a crap ton of it. You could have had simply the framing. You could have had just a framing where Bucky bombs something. You didn't have to have the Sokovia Accords. You didn't have to have this and that and everything else. All you had to do was really have the bombing and pin it on Bucky. That's it. And then you could go from there because Captain America would have gone on his exact same arc, and you wouldn't have had to deal with much of the other stuff. The only thing that I would keep also is the car crash, which again we find out later on is related to Iron Man. So, um, moving on from that point, we go kind of through similar things to the Winter Soldier, where it kind of turns into a political thriller for a little bit until Cap, Bucky, and Cap, Bucky, Falcon, and Black Panther, who are all kind of in a single chase with each other, all going after the Winter Soldier, are captured and taken to trial. And here is again where we have a situation that is this is basically where Captain America splits off and kind of figures out what's going on because we have Zemo who has been researching how to get the we find out at the end of the film exactly what he's after, which is the specific event in 1991. He needs information from it. He kills the Hydra agent who knows about it because he refuses to talk, which, again, I don't know why he wouldn't just torture him. It would make far more sense to just torture him instead of just hanging him upside down and drowning him. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. but it facilitates him needing to go after Bucky Barnes. So he goes after Bucky Barnes, gets the information he needs, and then sends Bucky on a rampage after sending him through one of his little brainwash things. We get a little bit of a callback to Winter Soldier, where Cap drags Bucky out of the water in the river after a helicopter crash, and the two manage to escape. Now, here we have kind of the build up to what will be the battle at the airport. Now, there's a few different things. Hawkeye comes out of retirement to join up with Captain America. There's some tension between Vision and Scarlet Witch, where you can see there's some emotions there. Vision seems to have a thing for her, but possibly because of the relation to the Infinity Stone, because the Infinity Stone that gave her her powers is the same one that's in Vision's forehead. And another thing that kind of doesn't really make sense for me in the final battle, and I'll get to that. So we have this whole thing that's set up where essentially they're keeping Wanda under house arrest because they feel that she is a danger to the public. So they're keeping her confined at the Avengers headquarters, which is strange and weird and doesn't make a lot of sense. Um, and well, it makes sense from Tony's point of view because Ross probably ordered it. But actually, before I keep going, there is one other thing I would like to mention. There is a line that Ross gives to Stark, which makes absolutely no sense. And it's in the beginning during that scene where they show the different battles and stuff like that. And it's, do you even know where Banner is? And then he comes back and says, if I had lost a nuclear warhead, you could bet there'd be hell to pay. General Ross lost course of Bruce Banner at least 3 times that we're aware of. And you're bitching at Tony Stark about losing track of him when you've done it multiple times in the past. Fuck you. Uh, and again, William Hurt plays a great asshole. I don't know if that's because he's an asshole in real life, but he plays a great asshole, even though he's a moron in this film. I don't even know why they brought this character back. They could have put in the Martin Freeman character, who shows up a couple of times throughout the film, but he seems like he would be a more charismatic a-hole instead of one that doesn't give a shit. And also just kind of putting Ross back in this just feels weird after so long. It's been 8 years since Incredible Hulk. But back to what I was saying before is, now we kind of get after the whole rampage and them escaping, we kind of get the clear division, the clear lines are drawn where you have Team Cap, who is Captain America, Falcon, Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye, Winter Soldier, and Ant-Man. Who Falcon brings in Ant-Man because they fought in the movie Ant-Man. So Falcon essentially calls him up and says, "Hey, you're upgraded to the Avengers." Now, then you have Team Iron Man, who's Iron Man, War Machine, Vision, uh, Spider-Man, who Tony Stark goes to recruit. And again, this is another first for this movie. This is the first appearance of Spider-Man in the MCU, which is interesting, and played by Tom Holland. There's a very good scene between Iron Man and Peter Parker, which builds their relationship a little bit. It doesn't get built considerably more until Spider-Man: Homecoming. Spider-Man, and then you have Black Panther and Black Widow. So you have the teams divided, and the whole thing is Team Cap figures out that the psychiatrist is actually a different guy, and they find out exactly what he wants because Winter Soldier basically says that, or Bucky says that there's this bunch of super soldiers just like him that are up in the hills of Siberia. They've been frozen in this place for years, and he basically said they can topple a government in a night, and yada. So they build up this huge threat. And this is another one of those things that it's kind of it's a subversion of expectations. I don't say it's in a terrible way. It's not like a Ryan Johnson type of way where, you want to shoot yourself at the end of the film. But you get to that point and you do this, basically the whole thing is that's their goal. They need to get there before he does, otherwise he will activate them, and they have no idea what they're going to do because he's basically they're essentially exactly like the Winter Soldier except they're even better. So they got to get out of Germany, which is where they are, and get to Siberia. So they have this helicopter, and it winds up getting shut down. Iron Man intercepts them with his team, and they fight at the airport. Now, the airport fight scene is really, 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 really good. The action in the scene is great. They have so many awesome moments. Ant-Man going inside the Iron Man armor is great. They have a few scenes. The stuff with Spider-Man is amazing. I was really happy with the stuff they did with Spider-Man, where he steals Captain America's shield at the beginning and does this whole thing where he fights Falcon and Winter Soldier, and again, it takes down Ant Man when Ant Man becomes Giant Man for the first time. Which you have that moment, and then you have Spider Man taking him out by webbing up his legs and stuff. Really, really good. And I can't say enough good things about that fight scene. And then the ending of it, the ending of it is kind of dumb, where you have Steve Rogers and Winter Soldier are the only ones that manage to get to the airship. They had the Avengers Quinjet, which is there that Iron Man's team came in, and they get to the Quinjet and they fly off, and Iron Man starts chasing them with War Machine, and Falcon is pursuing them. So he tells Vision to shoot Falcon down, which here is the thing that really weirds me out about the scene. So he tells him to shoot Falcon down. He shoots, he misses, he hits War Machine's armor and vaporizes his arc reactor, which causes his suit to just immediately shut down. He plummets to the ground, hits the ground, it results in his spine breaking. Now, if Vision had hit Falcon with that blast, he would have disintegrated him. Because Falcon doesn't have a suit of armor, he just has the wingsuit, which can deflect certain things. And then on top of that, if he had actually shot him down, there was nobody that was going to fly back and get him. So you would have killed him. That is ridiculous and stupid. Um, but going back, and then there's an even dumber part of it where Falcon says sorry, and then Tony Stark hits him with a repulsor blast. But essentially, Team Cap is the remaining members are captured, and they get thrown in the raft, which is this is the first appearance we have of the raft as well, which is basically this underwater prison type of thing. Um, so Cap and Bucky have they go to up to Siberia to try and find Zemo. At the same time, Iron Man goes to the raft to visit all the prisoners. Hawkeye basically tells him to go shove it. Ant Man tells him to go shove it. And then he gets to Falcon, and he manages to shut off the cameras and basically says like, look, because he gets a notice basically that the psychiatrist, because Steve mentioned the psychiatrist, he gets a notice that says the psychiatrist, the real psychiatrist has been found dead. So he now believes that Bucky was framed for the Vienna bombing. uh, in addition, I guess they said they found some prosthetics or something for that looked like Bucky's face, but the whole thing is, he believes Steve now, so he's going to go up north. Falcon gives up where they are. Iron Man meets up with them, and this is when we have this kind of the true fracturing of the Avengers, where Zemo has killed the other super soldiers. Because we find out that his real goal is essentially just to make the Avengers destroy each other from inside. Um, so we have this scene where he shows the full footage from 1991, and we find out that the two people that were in the car crash were actually Howard and Maria Stark. And both of them are killed by the Winter Soldier. And this leads Iron Man to then go into a rage and try to kill Bucky while Captain America tries to stop him. And this leads to actually probably one of the best hand to hand fights in the film, with Bucky and Cap versus Iron Man, where Iron Man is able to disintegrate Bucky's arm at one point with his Omnibeam, and Bucky and Cap are tossing the shield back and forth and punching Iron Man at the same time. And then it finally ends where Captain America looks like he's about to decapitate Iron Man, and instead he buries the shield in the arc reactor to disable Tony's suit. And then he walks off with the shield. Tony screams at him that his father made that, that's not his, and Captain America drops it. And then goes off with Bucky. And then, of course, we find out that he not only broke all of his friends out of jail, he is also residing in Wakanda now, where you know, where he's essentially him and Bucky are political refugees, where the Wakandan government will take them in because T'Challa has now found out. He travels with them there as well, and he finds out that Zemo was actually the one that perpetrated everything. He stops Zemo from killing himself, and they're able to take him into custody. And at the very end of the film, we have Tony Stark receiving a message from Steve Rogers that says he was sorry. He never told him about what happened with his parents in reality, and he gives him a phone if he ever wants to contact him again. So here are some, I've gone over mostly negative things, so I'm going to go over the things that I really do enjoy about the film. Like I said, the action is very, very well done. It has a lot of firsts for a Marvel film, including the introduction of Black Panther and Spider-Man in the same film. Black Panther actually has a very good character arc in this film that we get to see from beginning to end. I was kind of surprised at that, given that it's mostly centered, is supposed to be around Captain America and Iron Man. But Black Panther gets a very good arc in there. We kind of get to see where the Avengers kind of split off to in the time that they are, where we find them essentially in Infinity War, and we get to understand what's going on. We get the reintroduction to General Ross, which I could have done without, to be very honest. And then on top of that, we get the conflict between Captain America and Iron Man brought to new heights because we've always kind of felt that there was friction between the two of them for pretty much the entirety of the MCU, even though they were friendly with one another. There was friction there, and now that friction has been brought to a fever pitch where they're trying to kill each other. But the film does a good job in terms of developing the characters, but the setup for the fights is what really, really bugs me about it. And I do take points off of that. I take serious points off of that because the setup, again, I understand where they're coming from when they put these things up there, but they don't do a very good job at explaining them. And it's something I didn't really remember my first time watching it. I remembered it more now that I've watched it recently, as opposed to when I first watched it when it was in theaters. Um, and subsequent times after that, but this more recent time, it just seems those points just seem to hit a bit more. Maybe it's because I've been watching a lot of these movies lately, and I've been reviewing the plot lines as they go forward. It seems certain things seem fresher in my head, but it takes away from the believability of what's happening. It's kind of like two people that stop talking over a hissy fit. It's very, very, very strange in some ways, but they do a good job at the character interactions. The interactions between Captain America and Iron Man are really, really good. I like the interactions between Captain America and the Winter Soldier and Falcon. Falcon has some of the best lines actually in the entire movie, and I really, really did enjoy that. Like I said, they do a lot to actually develop Scarlet Witch as well, which I was happy with because they really didn't develop her a whole lot in Age of Ultron. She was very two-dimensional, but now she's been developed a bit more, and they kind of start that romantic plot line with Vision, which leads to one of those great moments in Infinity War. So, the connective tissues of this movie are good. The setup is not great. The acting is good. The special effects are good. The fighting and everything like that is good. So, if I was to give this film a rating, I would have to give it. I give it a 7.8 destroyed Winter Soldier arms. Out of 10. So with that, we go through Captain America Civil War, and next time we will dive into one of our newer heroes that is premiered in one of several actually that premieres in Phase 3 with Doctor Strange, starring Benedict Cumberbatch. And it again, it'll be an interesting film to dive into. It's actually one of my favorite ones from the MCU, so it'll be a joy to kind of go over it. So thank you again for listening. Remember to if you have any comments, put them below. Uh, Leave a like on the video. Hit the bell for notifications. Subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?